The document had been locked in a climate-controlled vault for 11 years. Before that, it sat in a colonial archive in London for 80 more. Before that, buried under the floor of a church in Addis Ababa for 6 decades. 2 governments had fought over it. 3 international law firms had billed a combined $4 million trying to understand it. Linguists from Oxford, Cairo, and Tel Aviv had stared at it under magnification and walked away defeated. Nobody could read it. Nobody except a 14-year-old black girl who hadn't slept in a real bed in 2 years. Her name was Maya, and on a cold Tuesday morning in November, she was doing what she always did at 4:47 a.m. She was reading in the dark. The back corner of the Hargrove University Library, 3rd subfloor, restricted archive section, row 7. That was home. Had been since she aged out of the group home on East 19th at 12. The security guard in the night shift, a heavy-set Haitian man named Gerald, had found her the first week. He looked at her for a long time. Then he looked at the book in her hands. Then he never said anything. Some people have grace like that. Gerald was one of them. Maya had made herself invisible, the way only children who had to survive learned how. She never took food from the break room, never used the staff bathroom. She washed in the public restroom on the ground floor before the building opened. She kept her bag flat against the shelf so it looked like a misplaced archive box. And she read. Every single night she read. Not fiction, not children's books. She read what nobody else touched. The oldest things on the shelves. The ones with call numbers so obscure they hadn't been checked out since 1987. It started with Latin, because Latin textbooks were thick and took a long time. Then Greek, because Greek came next on the shelf. Then she found a cracked, water-damaged volume on Ge'ez, the ancient liturgical language of Ethiopia, and something happened in her chest that she didn't have a word for, like recognition, like her brain had been waiting for exactly this. She read that book 4 times. Then she found the companion volume, then the academic papers tucked behind it, bound with a rubber band that disintegrated when she touched it, written by Dr. Tara Tedesse, published in 1962, never widely distributed. She read those 7 times. That was the morning everything changed, because Gerald wasn't the only one who found her that Tuesday. Dr. Priya Nair arrived at the archive at 5:15 a.m. because she hadn't been sleeping either. She was the university's junior archivist, 31, 2 years into a position that was slowly consuming her. The Beckley case had consumed the rest. She was carrying 2 coffees she hadn't paid for yet because the cafe didn't open until 7, and she'd taken them from the staff room with every intention of paying later. She pushed open the door to row 7 to pull a reference volume and stopped walking. There was a child sitting cross-legged on the floor between the shelves, reading, moving her lips silently. Her finger traced beneath the text without touching the page. The book in her lap was Dr. Tara Tedesse's 1962 treatise on transitional Ge'ez commercial dialects, the same book Priya had spent 3 days trying to decipher 2 weeks ago before admitting she needed help that hadn't come. Priya stood very still. She watched the girl's lips move, watched her eyes scan the page with the fluid ease of someone reading their morning newspaper. She set one of the coffees quietly on the floor, slid it forward with her foot. Maya's eyes came up, fast, alert, the eyes of a child trained to run. "Don't," Priya said. "I'm not going to report you. I just want to ask you something." Maya said nothing. Her hand moved slowly toward her bag. "That book you're reading," Priya kept her voice even, "can you actually read it, or are you just looking at it?" A long silence. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. "It's a secondary dialect, Ge'ez base with Aramaic commercial loan syntax. Merchants used it along the Red Sea trade corridor, 4th century mostly, some 5th. The author got the tonal shift wrong on page 84. The notation on the margin is right, the text isn't." Priya sat down on the floor, right there in her work clothes, on the cold archive floor. She sat down and looked at this child for a long moment. "How old are you?" she asked. 14. "How long have you been sleeping here?" Maya looked at her, calculating. 112 nights. Priya didn't say anything dramatic, didn't gasp, didn't reach for her phone. She picked up her own coffee, took a sip, looked at the shelves around them. "I have a problem, and I think you might be the only person in this building who can help me solve it." The Bekele case started 11 years ago, when the Ethiopian government filed an international claim against Harrington Colonial Trust, a British holding company that had acquired land rights in the Tigray region during the occupation in the 1930s. The land was now worth $430 million in mineral rights. The dispute had wound through 3 international courts, 2 arbitration panels, and more legal billable hours than most people earn in a lifetime. The entire case hinged on a single land deed, dated 1887, written in a dialect that sat at the intersection of formal Ge'ez, ancient Aramaic commercial script, and a regional notation system specific to the Tigray highland trade routes. Nobody had successfully translated the full document. Partial translations had been submitted by both sides, each conveniently supporting their own claim. The International Arbitration Panel had given both parties 60 days to produce a mutually agreed-upon translation. That deadline was in 4 days. Priya spread the photographs of the document across the archive table. High-resolution prints, each page sealed in a protective sleeve. Maya stood at the edge of the table. She hadn't sat down. She was still holding her bag strap with both hands, like she might need to leave quickly. "You don't have to do anything," Priya said. "I'm just asking if you can read it." Maya looked at the first page. Her eyes moved. Her lips went still, which was different from before when she'd been reading casually. This stillness was concentration, deep, total, the kind that makes the room feel quieter. "It's not just Ge'ez," Maya said. "The base script is formal ecclesiastical Ge'ez, mid-19th century, but the property clauses are written in the older commercial dialect, the one from the Tedesse book." She pointed without touching the sleeve. "See this notation cluster? That's a Highland trade marker, means the land boundaries were witnessed by a guild, not a government official. That changes the legal standing completely." Priya stared at her. "Say that again." "A guild witness," Maya repeated, "not a government one. In the Highland trade system, a guild witness deed superseded colonial administrative claims. It's on page 47 of the Tedesse treatise, second paragraph." Priya opened her laptop, pulled up the Tedesse scan, went to page 47, read the second paragraph. Her hands went still on the keyboard. "Oh," she said quietly. "Oh no." "What?" Maya asked. "That's been the whole argument. Both sides have been arguing over which government had administrative authority. If the witnesses were guild representatives, neither government argument holds. The deed stands independent of colonial administrative structure entirely." Maya looked at her. "That's what it says." Priya closed the laptop, stood up, looked at the ceiling for a moment, then looked back at Maya. "I need to make a phone call, and then I need you to not disappear." Maya's expression didn't change. "I don't have anywhere to go." The phone call turned into 3 phone calls, which turned into an emergency meeting at 9 a.m. that Priya had not been authorized to call, but called anyway. By the time the conference room filled, word had traveled fast and wrong, the way institutional gossip always does. The junior archivist had found a translator. That was the charitable version. The less charitable version, whispered between 2 men in expensive suits in the hallway outside the conference room, was that Priya had lost her mind and brought a child off the street to a $400 million legal proceeding. Maya sat at the end of the conference table. Someone had put a glass of water in front of her. She hadn't touched it. She was wearing the same clothes she'd worn yesterday and the day before. Her jacket had a tear along the left shoulder seam that she'd tried to mend with a safety pin. She sat very straight, eyes forward. She'd learned early that when you were somewhere people didn't expect you to be, you made yourself as still and precise as possible. Movement drew attention. Stillness made people look past you. That strategy failed immediately. Richard Calloway, senior partner at Calloway, Marsh & Vance, walked in, looked at Maya, and turned to Priya with an expression that said everything he wasn't saying out loud. "This is your translator? This is the person you pulled us all in here for?" "This is Maya. She can read the Bekele deed. She's a child. She's the only person in the room who can read it." Calloway set his briefcase down with more force than necessary. Dr. Morrison, the university's head linguist, 62, wire-rimmed glasses, a man who had published 11 books and currently could not translate the deed in question, cleared his throat. Perhaps we should at least hear what she has to say, in the interest of time. Calloway sat, crossed his arms. The Ethiopian family's legal representative, a woman named Helen Bekele, 45, who had flown in from Addis Ababa 2 days ago, leaned forward slightly. She had said nothing yet. She'd been watching Maya since the moment Maya walked in. There was something in her expression that nobody else in the room had. It wasn't skepticism. It wasn't relief. It was careful, precise attention, like someone watching a match being struck in a dark room. "Maya," Priya said, "can you walk them through what you found?" Maya looked at the photographs spread across the table. She had asked for them to be laid in sequence before anyone else arrived. Nobody had thought to question that. She stood, not because she was performing confidence she didn't have, but because she could see the documents better standing up. "The deed is written in 3 distinct registers," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried in the still room. "The opening section is formal ecclesiastical ge'ez, standard for official documents of this period. Both previous translations got this section mostly right." She moved to the second photograph. "This section is transitional. The scribes switched to a commercial dialect specific to the Tigray Highland trade corridor. Most translators miss the switch because the letter forms are superficially similar, but the syntax structure changes completely here." She pointed to a cluster of symbols in the lower margin. "What does that say?" Dr. Morrison asked, leaning forward now despite himself. "It's a guild mark," Maya said, looking at him. "Specifically, the mark of the Merchant Brotherhood of Adwa. It means the land transfer was witnessed and validated by the guild, not by any administrative authority. In Highland trade law, that classification gave the deed immunity from colonial administrative override." The room was very quiet. Calloway's jaw tightened. "That's a convenient interpretation." "It's not an interpretation," Maya said. "It's a translation." She looked at him directly. "The mark is categorical. It's on page 47 of Tedesse's 1962 treatise on Red Sea conversal dialects. I can recite the relevant passage if you need me to." The room shifted. Calloway's associate, a younger man named Davis, opened his laptop and started typing. Dr. Morrison pulled out his own copy of Tedesse's treatise, the one that had been sitting on his shelf unread, and turned to page 47. Helen Bekele spoke for the first time in Amharic, fast, direct, not translated for the room. Maya looked up. "She said," Helen told the room, her English carrying a British education and something older beneath it, "she asked where you learned the Highland commercial dialect." Maya's hands went still on the table. "From a book by a scholar named Tara Tedesse." Helen Bekele's expression changed. Something moved across her face like weather. She said something else in Amharic, quieter this time. "What did she say?" Calloway asked. Priya looked at Maya. Maya was looking at Helen. "She said Tara Tedesse was her grandmother." The silence that followed was not the silence of an empty room. It was the silence of something shifting, of weight redistributing. Helen Bekele sat very still, looking at this 14-year-old girl who had learned her grandmother's life's work from a discarded book in a university basement, and her eyes filled without spilling. Priya had to look away. Calloway did not. He leaned forward. "This is touching, but it proves nothing about the legal validity of the translation. We need independent verification. We need credentials." He looked at Maya like she was a problem he could still solve by ignoring. "How do we know she's not just reciting something she memorized without understanding it?" Maya looked at him. "Ask me anything in the document, any line, any clause." Calloway almost smiled. "Fine. Page 4, the third boundary clause. What does it say?" Maya didn't look at the photograph. "The third boundary clause defines the eastern land limit as running from the stone marker at the foot of Debret Sion to the seasonal river that runs dry in the month of Hamle." She paused. Then she looked at Calloway. "Hamle is the 11th month of the Ethiopian calendar, roughly equivalent to July in the Gregorian system. The deed specifies the river at its dry season boundary, not its flood boundary. That's a significant legal distinction because the flood boundary was what the Colonial Survey used in 1934. They were measuring different rivers, effectively." Davis stopped typing, looked up. Dr. Morrison had gone pale in the way people go pale when they realize the answer had been sitting in front of them for years. "The flood boundary," Dr. Morrison said almost to himself. "That's why the survey maps never aligned. They were using different seasonal reference points." "Exactly," Maya said. She sat back down. She picked up the glass of water, drank from it. Her hand was steady. Calloway stood, walked to the window. He had the posture of a man doing very fast calculations that were not going in his favor. His entire legal strategy had rested on the Colonial Survey's boundary definitions being correct. If the deed used a different seasonal reference point, the survey was invalid as a comparison document. 4 years of legal argument. Gone. He turned from the window. "How old did you say you are?" 14. "And you've been living in this library for how long?" 112 nights. "Where before that?" Maya looked at him without flinching. "The group home on East 19th. Before that, 3 foster placements. Before that, the apartment on Amsterdam Avenue until my mother died." The room was uncomfortable now in a different way, the kind of uncomfortable that comes from a mirror being held up without warning. Helen Bacaley spoke again, in English this time. She looked at Maya, not at the lawyers, not at the academics, at Maya. "My grandmother spent 40 years documenting those dialects," she said. "She submitted her research to 3 universities. All 3 told her the work was too specialized for publication. She self-published 200 copies in 1962. She died in 1971, not knowing if anyone had ever read them." She cleared her throat. "A girl sleeping in a basement read them. And today, because of that girl, my family's land will be returned to us." Calloway's associate Davis closed his laptop. He looked at Calloway. Calloway looked at him. A message passed between them that was not comfortable to witness. "Mr. Calloway," Priya said. Her voice was controlled in the way that means the opposite of calm underneath. "I need to ask you something directly. Are you going to challenge this translation on the merits, or are you going to challenge it because of who translated it?" The room held its breath. Calloway picked up his briefcase, looked at Maya one more time, then at Dr. Morrison. "I'll need 24 hours to have our own team review the Tedeschi Treatise citations." Dr. Morrison removed his glasses. He cleaned them, put them back on. "I've been looking at page 47 while you were talking." He looked at Calloway. "The girl is correct. Every citation is accurate. The guild mark classification is unambiguous." He paused. "I should have caught this 2 years ago." He looked at Maya. "I'm sorry that I didn't." Maya didn't know what to do with an apology from a 62-year-old academic. She nodded. "That's okay," she said. "Most people don't read the footnotes." Someone laughed. Not the cruel kind, the kind that releases pressure. Calloway left without another word. Davis lingered. He was maybe 28. He looked at Maya with an expression his boss hadn't allowed himself. "That boundary clause argument, did you work that out from the document, or did you already know it?" "I worked it out last night, after Priya showed me the photographs. I was awake anyway." Davis nodded slowly. He picked up his bag. "For what it's worth, I think you're right. I think you've been right about all of it." He left. The room emptied slowly until it was Maya, Priya, and Helen Bacaley. The photographs still spread across the table, the water glass half empty. Helen sat across from Maya. She opened her bag, pulled out a small photograph, old, black and white, slightly bent at the corner. She slid it across the table. Maya looked at it. A woman, maybe 60 in the photo, sitting at a desk covered in papers. She was writing. She wore reading glasses pushed down her nose. She looked like someone who forgot to eat when she was working. "That is Tara, my grandmother. She taught herself 6 languages. She submitted that treatise to every major linguistics journal in Europe and was rejected by all of them. A woman, African, writing about dialects they decided were too obscure to matter." She looked at Maya steadily. "You found her work in a basement. You read it until you knew it, and today you used it to restore something she spent her life trying to protect. Maya looked at the photograph for a long time.
I didn't know who she was, Maya said. I just read it because it was there and nobody else was reading it. Helen nodded. She doesn't need credit. She's gone. But Maya, she leaned forward, what about you? Who was making sure you are protected? The question landed differently than any question Maya had been asked in 2 years. Not, what can you do for us? Not, prove it. Not, who gave you permission to be here? Who was making sure you are protected? Maya's jaw tightened. She looked at the table. Nobody, she said. Not right now. Helen looked at Priya. Something passed between the two women that was not a question. It was a decision being reached simultaneously. That, Helen said, is going to change today. What changed that afternoon happened quickly, the way things do when the people in the room have both resources and the will to use them. Priya called the university's student welfare office, an office that technically did not cover non-students, but was persuaded otherwise when Helen Bekele's name appeared in the email header. Helen called her family's foundation, which had a youth scholarship program that had never been applied to a 14-year-old American girl before, but was about to be. Dr. Morrison, who had been quiet since his apology, made 3 phone calls from the hallway that nobody else heard. He came back in and said only that a linguistics mentor he trusted would be in contact within the week. And Callaway's firm, after their overnight review of the Tedesse treatise, sent a single email at 7:43 the next morning. 2 sentences. Translation verified. Harrington Colonial Trust withdraws its boundary claim effective immediately. $430 million. Returned. Because a girl no one saw read a book no one else touched. The formal arbitration signing happened 3 days later in a room with better lighting and more cameras. Maya stood in the back, near the door, the way she always stood. Helen found her there. "Come stand with us," Helen said. "I don't need to be in the photographs." Helen looked at her. "Do you know why my grandmother documented those dialects even when no one would publish her work?" Maya shook her head. "Because she said the language belonged to the people who spoke it, not to the people with the credentials to validate it." Helen took Maya's arm gently. "Come stand with us. You belong in this photograph. Not because you solved the case, because you preserved something that almost got lost. Again." Maya let herself be walked forward. The cameras flashed. She stood straight. She didn't smile at first, the reflexive not smiling of someone who had spent 2 years trying to not be noticed. But Helen said something quietly in Amharic beside her, and Maya looked up. "What does that mean?" she asked. Helen smiled. "It means the one who remembers carries the past forward safely. My grandmother used to say it. I think she would have said it about you." Maya's face changed. The careful stillness she wore like armor shifted just slightly, and underneath it was something younger and more fragile and more real. She let herself be in the photograph. She let herself be seen. The weeks that followed were not magic. Real life rarely is. Maya was placed with a temporary housing advocate through the university while longer-term arrangements were made. She still woke up at 4 a.m. out of habit and lay in the unfamiliar bed of a guest room listening for Gerald's footsteps and remembering he wasn't there. She called him once. He picked up immediately, knew it was her before she said anything, just said, "Good," and she knew he meant it. The Bekele Family Foundation funded a full educational scholarship, not just tuition, housing, meals, a clothing stipend, a MacBook that Maya held with both hands for 5 minutes before opening it. Dr. Morrison connected her with a linguist at Columbia who specialized in Semitic languages and had been looking for a research assistant who actually wanted to read footnotes. Maya had her first official mentoring session on a Wednesday afternoon and came home and sat on the edge of her bed and cried in a way she hadn't let herself cry since her mother died, not from sadness, from the specific, overwhelming feeling of being in the right place, of fitting somewhere. Helen flew back to Addis Ababa, but called every Sunday.
She was having her grandmother's treatise republished, properly this time, with full academic distribution through a university press in London that had originally rejected it 60 years ago and now, under different leadership and considerable embarrassment, was glad to correct the record. The cover listed Tara Tedesse as primary author. A foreword was being written by a 14-year-old girl in New York City. Maya wrote it in one sitting, 4 pages, no corrections. She wrote about reading in the dark, about the rubber band that fell apart when she touched the bound papers, about the feeling of recognition she didn't have a word for the first time she read the Genèse text, like something calling her name in a language she hadn't known she already spoke. She wrote about how languages carry people inside them, the people who built them and traded in them and prayed in them and fought over them, and how when you learn a language you are really learning everyone who ever lived inside it. She wrote at the end that she had thought she had no people, no lineage, no country, and then she found a book by a woman she'd never met who had written something too valuable to lose, and now she knew, sometimes your people find you through the pages they leave behind. Gerald read the foreword when it was published. He read it in the archive at 4:47 a.m., which is when he started his shift. He set it down on the shelf in row 7 and didn't say anything for a while. Then he said out loud to nobody, "I knew that girl was something." On a Saturday in March, 5 months after the arbitration, Maya went back to the Hargrove University Library. Not the basement archive, the main reading room. She walked in through the front door, which she had never done. She found a table in the center, where the light came through the high windows and fell across the wood in long, clean rectangles, and she sat down. She opened her bag. She pulled out a book, a new one, thick, a graduate-level text on ancient South Arabian dialects that her Columbia mentor had recommended. She opened to page 1. A security guard walked past, looked at her, kept walking. Nobody asked her to leave. Nobody would ever ask her to leave again. If you've made it this far, this story found you for a reason. Maybe you know what it feels like to be the smartest person in a room that doesn't want you there. Maybe you know someone right now who is sitting in a basement somewhere, invisible, capable of things no one has bothered to ask about. Share this video for them. Drop a comment below and tell us, when were you underestimated? When did someone finally see you? Those stories matter, and this community needs to hear them. Subscribe if you believe that genius doesn't come with a home address or a permission slip. Hit the like button if Maya's story moved you, because every like tells the algorithm that stories like this one deserve to be seen. And they do. So do the people in them. Right now, tonight, there is a child in a library somewhere reading something no one told them they were allowed to read, learning something no one thought to teach them, carrying forward something the world almost let get lost. See them, before they have to prove themselves to a conference room. Just see them. The next discovery, the next translation, the next voice that changes everything might belong to the person you almost walked past.